we've set out, some of our plans, and that everything that we set out are fully costed. And I think that stands in stark contrast to what we've seen from this government and their mini budget, which has led to this huge turmoil and spiralling breakdown of confidence in the British economy, because their plans are not funded and they're mainly funded by borrowing. And that does stand in stark contrast to what we're saying. So, for example, we've been calling for the energy price freeze long before the government brought that in. But crucially, we think that should be being paid for not by extra borrowing, but by bringing in a windfall tax on the super excess profits that the energy companies have seen over the last few months. So, our plans are fully costed, but they are, I would disagree with Norman there. I do think we have been bringing forward the big solutions to the big problems that this country faces, but we're doing that in a responsible way.
But Lucy, a windfall tax wouldn't pay for all the money that is necessary to prop up households and businesses. We're talking about 100 to 120 billion over 2 years. Windfall tax, at best, 10, 20 billion. So you would still have to borrow the vast amount of money to pay for that.
Well, look, there are different ways of calculating some of that, and those costs. That I think that's the maximum those costs can be, and obviously, if the costs are going to be that high, that's because the energy companies are getting an even bigger windfall. So, they are two sides of the same coin here. The reason energy prices are going up because of global factors, not because our oil and gas companies and our energy supply companies in this country have made some good business decisions. They are sitting on excess windfall profits of around about what the Treasury are estimating could be as high as £170 billion over the next couple of years. And that's the eye-watering level of the excess profits. And that's why we've said bring in a windfall tax. So the more the costs go up, the more their excess profits and the windfall goes up as well. But, that's why you've got to have these plans costed in the way that we have said. But you've also got to ensure that taxation is fair. So it's not a case of cutting taxes for those at the top of society and hope that somehow that's going to trickle down to growth for everybody else. That's an experiment we've now endured for the last sort of 30 years of our running of our economy, and it's not worked. And that's what the government have been doing with their cuts to corporation tax, their initial plans to cut the top rate of tax, and also the cut in stamp duty, which we know will mainly benefit landlords and second homeowners. So we have a very different approach to taxation, as well as a very different approach to running the economy. But the most important thing now is that this government goes back to the drawing board, reverses its mini budget, and tries to stem this absolute loss of confidence that we're seeing in the British economy.
I just want to ask you why, when Sir Keir Starmer was asked repeatedly, it has to be said, during PMQs by the Prime Minister yesterday, why he wouldn't commit to agreeing or supporting the 2-year energy price cap guarantee. He only committed to the 6 months, and despite being pushed on it, why won't he sign up for the 2 years?
Well, I don't think he was avoiding that question. It is Prime Minister's questions, and I think the person who was really avoiding any accountability in Parliament yesterday was the Prime Minister, who seemed to be totally tin-eared to what is now happening to our economy and the impact that is having on everyday working people who are seeing their mortgage rate going through the roof as a direct result of her decisions and her mini budget. When we set out an energy price freeze long before the government were thinking of one, and when we were calling on the government to do it, we had said that would be initially for 6 months funded by the windfall tax, but that we would keep that constantly under review. So they're the ones actually in government, and we're putting forward costed proposals from opposition, which they're now adopting. But I think that your viewers should be in no doubt that we would have stood by. We stand by people when it comes to dealing with these rising energy costs, but we do so in a fair way, in a way that brings the income back in from these excess profits. So I think it's the Prime Minister who was avoiding answering the questions yesterday, and she seemed to be totally in denial about what is happening to ordinary working people and mortgage payers and the British economy under her watch.